There was a specific section of Center Street in the Smithville neighborhood, and this garnered the nickname of Dynamite Hill because there were so many bombings. So it wasn't just a nickname that they gave, it was a description of the total collapse of rule of law. Welcome to Political Critical Thinking. I'm Stephanie, and if you were a Black professional, a doctor, a lawyer, or even a veteran, and you moved into a white neighborhood, you could pretty much expect that your house would explode. Local authorities, most notably Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, often facilitated or ignored the violence because, quite honestly, the police were frequently complicit or actually members of the Ku Klux Klan. But the most infamous bombing, and the one that probably garners the most attention, is the 16th Street Baptist Church that killed 4 young girls. In that moment, it didn't just expose hatred, it forced the country to confront a deeper question. Would America continue to be governed by fear? Or would they decide to stand up and collectively fight this injustice together and fight for equal rights? So let's go back to the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921. The Greenland neighborhood of Tulsa was the wealthiest Black neighborhood in the country, earning the nickname Black Wall Street. This massacre involved the first aerial firebombing of a U.S. city. They used private aircrafts to drop bombs on 35 city blocks. It was a total loss of generational wealth, and insurance companies wouldn't pay for the damage. Wilmington Insurrection in 1898 was, again, a successful Black government that was overthrown by a white mob. The Wilmington Insurrection was a calculated campaign of racial cleansing. See, they weaponized terror to dismantle Black success. Hundreds of Black men, women, and children were hunted through the streets and driven into freezing pine swamps. This was the physical liquidation of a thriving middle class. The Rosewood Massacre in 1923. Rosewood represents the self-sufficient Black town, triggered by false accusations of assault against a white woman. Rosewood was a rural community where Black residents owned the land. The massacre turned a property-owning class into refugees overnight. The government realized that burning neighborhoods down created way too much attention and got too many headlines. It was more efficient to legislate it out of existence. Between 1949 and 1974, under the guise of urban renewal, what James Baldwin famously called Negro removal, the federal government used the Housing Act of 1949. The data shows that poverty was manufactured through these 3 distinct phases of wealth extraction. Phase 1, physical liquidation. 1898 to 1923, Black wealth did exist. Black communities had their own banks, lawyers, doctors, businesses, districts. The wealth was not lost. It was stolen. Phase 2, capital starvation. From 1934 to 1968, when physical violence became bad for PR, the government switched to redlining. The Federal Housing Administration and the HOLC deliberately mapped Black neighborhoods as hazardous, denying them low-interest mortgages that built the white middle class. This created a mathematical gap compounded over decades. Phase 3, infrastructure erasure. From 1949 to 1974, under urban renewal, the government used eminent domain to seize the land of Black families that did manage to own land. And they did that by labeling thriving communities like Pittsburgh Hills District or Miami's Overtown as blighted. The state seizes the land for pennies on the dollar to build civic arenas and highways. They stripped Black families of their primary asset just as it was becoming valuable. And this is why this is important, because today's poverty rate is the compound interest of this extraction. The wealth gap has grown exponentially because one group was allowed to accumulate assets and allow them to appreciate while the other keeps getting reset back to zero. In the 1970s and 80s, as unemployment skyrocketed in Black communities due to deindustrialization, drug use and crime increased among all races. But rather than treating this as a health crisis or an economic crisis, the government defined it as a crisis of criminality. Disproportionate targeting. While Black and white Americans use drugs at roughly similar rates, Black people are imprisoned for drug charges at nearly 6 times the rate of whites. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 created a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, which is associated more with white users. So it's really important, and I hope you take anything away from this, that you understand that the high rates of poverty and incarceration are not culturally inherent, but structurally engineered. Now that we've discussed how we got here, let's pivot to DEI. See, DEI initiatives are not designed to lower standards, but to correct specific systemic market failures. The removal of DEI in Black history is described in text as a modern iteration of drained pool politics. Historically, when courts ordered the integration of public swimming pools, many white municipalities chose to drain and close the pools rather than share them. By removing DEI in history today, the administration is effectively draining the pool of the economy and education system. This will likely result in stagnating inequality for all of us. They say that teaching us about slavery or about the Tulsa Massacre or Wilmington or redlining is hating America. But that is a deception. They aren't hiding this history because they are ashamed of the past. They are hiding it because they need to use it as the blueprint for the future. The machinery of displacement doesn't care about your identity. It doesn't care about your assets and your compliance. It doesn't care who you voted for. It doesn't care if you're white or you're Black. It targeted everybody. You cannot fix a house if you aren't allowed to mention the cracks in the foundation. We tell the story not to tear America down, but to dismantle the machinery that keeps us from building something better. Because in the end, there is no such thing as a minority right. There are only universal rights. And if you let them come for one group in that morning, they will be coming for you at sunset. Thanks for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. And please, if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and share within your community. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.